Spreading the news.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
New York, I love you. I love New York.
Rose trying to get open, fires away. Bang! It's over! The Bulls win at the buzzer! Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. LeBron James with the rejection. Puts up the three. Won't go. Rebound Bosh. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang!
What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Off the Ball podcast with me, your host, Chris LeBron. And today is the day the NBA is back in full effect. We got the New York Knicks, Boston Celtics today. Boston raising up that banner. Hopefully, my New York Knicks can spoil today. But I got a great guest coming back on the pod. It's been a few, so I knew I had to hit her up and say that we gotta get back on the pod. Lauren Gunn, what's going on, Lauren?
Oh, I'm so excited for this season. Thanks for having me. Yeah, there's so much going on in the NBA right now. There are so many storylines and things that I can't wait to see kind of come to fruition. There's been so many changes this offseason. So I'm super excited that we're on opening night. And yes, I'm very much hoping that your Knicks can spoil the Celtics celebration tonight for sure.
Yes, let's hope. Like I said, I'm excited. You're excited. It's like Christmas, right? And like you said, the storylines. And before we get talking about your Dallas Mavericks, what are some of those storylines that you're very intrigued about? Because you could literally, there's a storyline for almost every team, maybe multiple storylines. So, what are a few that you're?
Yeah, I definitely think number one for me is probably Memphis. I think Memphis, I want to see what they look like. I want to see, can they stay healthy? Can they stay available? How dominant are they in the West? I think that they've got a really interesting group. Obviously, the Edey edition is going to be we got to see what that looks like. It looked good in preseason, but it's a long season. The playoffs are completely different. So I have a lot of questions that I'm looking to get answered with Memphis. Sacramento, DeMar DeRozan, what do things look like there? What do they run into spacing issues? Does it, that's an easy kind of jump to conclusion there with Sabonis and DeMar. But I'm a Fox person. I love De'Aaron. So I'm really excited to see what they look like. They obviously kept Malik, which was crazy. I'm surprised that happened, but that was awesome. In the East, Cleveland, the new look Cavs with, you got a new coach in there, new system. I want to see what that looks like. I think Darius Garland is ready for a bounce back year. And obviously New York, hello, probably the crazy that I remember the moment when I got the news about the cat trade. I literally stopped in my tracks, was shocked. So I'm really excited to see how they look. Obviously got some questions about Mikal with all the stuff I'm seeing on Twitter. So I want to see is there any merit to that?
Oh, man.
How is he okay? Is that blown out of proportion? So
one thing. I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, go for it.
He's a career 39% 3-point shooter?
Something like that, yeah.
And a high clip too, right? I think
high
last
clip.
year he shot 8 threes and shot 39. Why are we messing with the shot at this late in your? And somebody brought this. I forgot what I was listening to, but they were like, "Why are we messing up your shot this late in your 20s? This is something you do, if you have
if you struggle,
if you're struggling or if you have time, if you're injured and you just have time, but not year 7, 8 into your and you shoot it at a good clip." Laura, I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to get information. I'm like, why are we tinkering with a shot it goes in? It goes in.
Yeah. So he's 37.5 for three on his career numbers, only 4.5 attempts per game. But last year he shot 7 attempts per game, and I expect that to still be high volume. I think that's more of a reflection with what we can expect from Mikal. But yeah, that has just been a little bit crazy. The videos haven't looked great. Similarly, Chet Holmgren's changing his shot. Does not look great to me. I'm not a shot doctor, but I'm like, So these are little things that might be blown out of proportion on social media, but I need to see them, come to fruition again with OKC. Now Hartenstein is out. There's so many things,
Big.
moving. So I'm really intrigued. I think New Orleans is also going to be an interesting situation this year. I think I'm excited for them about the DeJounte addition. I think that that's going to be a good addition, but CJ, Herb, Jordan Hawkins, bringing him in, their front court average height is 6'7". Like they've got big questions over in New Orleans, and we're kind of just sliding by them. So I'm really intrigued. There's a lot going on in the NBA right now.
Yeah, like I said, it's going and like with Mikal, I'm trying to be positive with the Knicks. I think we'll be all right. I think eventually, you figure that out.
Yeah.
And we're going to see today, obviously. So we're going to get to know, to see if, if the shot mechanics change is something for the good or for the, that we got to get back to the old Mikal shooting form. It was never pretty, but my thing is if it goes in, that's, I think you said New Orleans is very interesting too, because they have zero size. It reminds me of like a college team.
Right.
Where the center 6'7", and like it's like okay, but to me, my biggest thing with them is Zion. It's literally
always gonna be Zion, right?
If Zion's healthy, Lauren, like they're the sky's the limit for them. They can
and he
be
looks good. Like he looks like he did everything that you've asked of him, right? And he's showing up, he's present, he looks good, but if you have him bearing the physical brunt all season long, like again, you're playing with fire a little bit there, just going off of history. Of course, you hope that the health can sort of, I guess, maintain or maybe a bit of a body transformation could help all of that. You hope, but that's just not always how it goes. And so you got to be real careful with big men. But I think New Orleans, I just think it's going to be an interesting year. Lots of questions.
We had a few big extensions yesterday, and Houston re-signed Sengun and Jalen Green. I thought maybe it would be one or the other. And it still can be. It's still, Jalen Green was only a 2+1, I believe, with a player option for the third. So it still can be, and Sengun got, I think 5 years, right? Like $180, which is, it's a lot of money for a guy.
Right.
Listen, I love Sengun, but it's still a lot of money to give the guy who's still unproven. But do you like the direction of Houston? Because just a few years ago, it seemed like it was a mess. Last year, I mean, they get Ime to be their head coach. They've drafted some solid guys. Obviously Fred VanVleet, you get that. And, so do you like the direction of Houston? Because I wasn't crazy about it last year. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I thought getting Fred was going to mess up the youngsters, but in reality, it actually benefited them though. So do you like the direction of Houston?
Yeah, I like the direction that they're going, but they have some serious questions that they need to sort of address. I think that the Sengun extension was phenomenal. I think locking him up was huge. And to me, he's the one you needed to prioritize over Jalen Green. I think getting Jalen Green at a 3-year deal as opposed to a 4-year deal and less than the max is a huge win for the Rockets. But again, they have lots of questions. Like you mentioned, Fred VanVleet, this is the final year of that $40 million plus deal. He's got a team option going into the following year, which we'll see how that pans out. But that's a lot of money for someone like Fred VanVleet, who was good. Yeah. Like you mentioned, he was good. He's still only 30 years old. There has been some injury history, but he was good for them last year. They need somebody setting the table for everybody. So it's not that he's, washed or anything like that. You just, when you've got these young players that exceed expectations, and I think everybody is kind of sees the writing on the wall for someone like Reed Shepherd, who everyone has high expectations for, you have to be really methodical with how you're sort of laying out your long-term future with where you're placing your money. And that Jabari extension is going to be really interesting when that timeline comes up. Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore, two guys that they absolutely love, are right around the corner. Those two guys don't seem like they're going anywhere. In fact, I think in terms of Reed Shepherd, Amen, and Cam Whitmore, they're probably prioritized over someone like Jabari long-term. That's my read currently, but we'll see.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, and even someone like Tari Eason, who's not going to get as much money as Jalen Green or any of these other guys, but they love him and they want to keep him, as they should. He's a really solid young player too. So sometimes when you have, we're seeing OKC right now be very strategic with how they use that leftover money to go out and spend, like they just did while they still have certain guys on their rookie deals. Can Houston do something to the same effect, or is it going to be Fred VanVleet? Are we going to kind of stay in like a similar group and just go for this natural development route? So we'll see, but they have some real decisions to make on who they want to prioritize and who might get left out, and do they become available on the trade market?
All right, I'm with you on there. All right, so before we get into Dallas, let me give you one more question.
Yeah.
Give me a team that you're higher on than the masses, and a team that you're lower on than the masses.
Let's see. Which direction do I want to go? East or west? I'm gonna say lower on. I'm gonna say I am lower on. I don't want to say the Pelicans. That's kind of boring. Let's see here. I'm gonna say I'm probably lower on the Clippers than most. I think some people still expect them to be a given in the playoff picture, and in this Western Conference, I don't think that at all. I think that they could be in for a real rude awakening. And so higher than most, I am going to go with, let's see here. I think actually lower than most. I'm gonna say Miami. I'm gonna just to spice things up a bit. I think Miami's they're in for a rude awakening as well. Higher than most, I'm gonna go with Phoenix. I think people are kind of looking at Minnesota, OKC, Dallas, but Phoenix, like, I am not a huge like super team mega trio person, but I think Phoenix has had some really under the radar moves, and they're going to be right there. So I'd say I'm higher on Phoenix than most.
I'm with you in there. That would have been mine. Who I'm higher on most. I think they figured out the point guard situation.
Oh yeah,
it's not
Big
that
addition.
Devin Booker can't play the point. Is that
Right.
you don't? That's not that's not what you need him for. You need him to be you need him to be Devin Booker. You need to be a 28 game guy. And I think he averaged 6 assists. And like I said, as a secondary playmaker, he's perfect. But you needed that tone setter, that the guy who's going to put everyone in the right spots. And they found that with Jones, where they got at basically nothing. They got him for free.
I know. I'm still like hands on my head about that one, but yeah, no, I think they made some awesome moves. I think their draft was phenomenal. I even tweeted after their draft. Yeah, Ryan Dunn and even Oso Ighodaro. Like, I really liked their draft, and all the responses to that tweet were second round guys are not going to be playing for a contender, and I'm like, okay, well, that's not how I read it. But hey, man, they're even exceeding what I thought they would be. Yeah. I just liked them as players.
Second round picks play now.
That's what I'm saying.
It's not like the old NBA. It's not like the old NBA anymore.
And I think even if last year told us anything, it's look at these teams that are going far with so many young players. You have to rely on these young players, even if they're not necessarily gonna have a ton in their bag. Like, there's still a level of raw talent to them that they kind of got that they have to sort of figure out with in terms of experience, especially in a playoff setting, but they are going to give you high energy. They are going to give you, defense, depending on the player, but that sort of young energy and sort of like bounciness, you need that. And so I think a team like Phoenix, who, when you look at someone like Bradley Beal, who's struggled availability wise, having a guy like Ryan Dunn or somebody that you can just throw out there, on top of retaining Royce O'Neal and bringing in Tyus Jones and Monte Moore, like these guys, I think they rounded out their roster. And even Mason Plumlee, I think, is a really underrated addition for them. I think that they've rounded out that roster really well. I think the coaching change is going to bode well for them. So I'm
coach body up.
Unfortunately for my Dallas Mavericks, I think Phoenix is going to be right back there. But it's a good rivalry, so good narrative for sure.
Oh yeah, we love that. That's a fun. That Booker and Luka going at it is always. Yeah. It's always. You got
KD, Kyrie too. Like, it just keeps going.
It's great. I love it. That's the great thing about the NBA. So let's get into it. The Dallas Mavericks, the defending Western Conference champion, Dallas Mavericks. I didn't see. If you would have said in the beginning of the season, Dallas, could they? I was like, they could, but there's a lot missing there. Relying on a rookie center, which you guys stole our pick from. We're still upset about.
I know. Thank God. I remember.
It's Knicks fans. Oh my God. There was a lot of Knicks fans that were so upset, and I was like,
As
what?
They should be. As
You
they should
gotta
be.
give them credit. You gotta give them credit. They were smart. I would have done the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
I've done the same thing too. I remember watching it because there have been seasons in the past where Dallas has not tanked. In fact, the year that they ended up tied with Memphis and New Orleans, that went 1-2 for Zion and Ja. I remember Dallas was in that tiebreaker, and I was like, and they ended up losing their pick. And it was just like the whole thing was a disaster because they were if they had just, anyway, Dallas has not done a great job tanking in the past, but the fact that they were able to keep that pick, I mean, and then hit on the pick too, like that is not something that typically happens for the Dallas Mavericks. So we're still counting our blessings for that one. Let's just say that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you to the entire city of New York. I appreciate you. Oh my
God. We got Brunson. We got Brunson.
You got Brunson. That one still hurts.
And I say that all the time. Like, hey, they got the pick. We got Brunson for we got Brunson. They didn't pay Brunson. We got our star. So we win. We win. It's a win-win for both.
You got your point guard. Yep.
But Derek Lively, obviously, he played tremendous. And I'm a Duke Blue Devils fan, and I've been seeing him on the circuit scene, and I'm like, this kid, if he figures it out, it's going to be good. And he dealt with a lot of injuries at Duke at first, and it was very questionable. Like, oh man, he might not be it. This might not be it. And then he got healthy, and then we saw the rim run and we saw the rim protection. And I was like, okay, even some outside shooting that I still buy in with him, which I think we haven't seen yet, and he's still a baby, so that's gonna eventually going to come. But I think there's still some there. So he played great. Obviously, Luka led the league in scoring, and then him and Kyrie, people, it didn't look like it worked last year, but then this year it definitely did. And then obviously the moves, the trade, that to me was the difference between you guys maybe being a one and done in the playoffs to being Western 100%. Conference champions and getting Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. So do you think that was where that trade was set the tone for what led to getting to the NBA finals?
Yes, 100%. Because up until that point in the season, Dallas, it was clear that Lively needed to be the starter, because before that it was Dwight Powell, which is a completely different. I don't even need to say it. So, completely different reality. So then you had Daniel Gafford, and now you have these two rim running, like you mentioned, rim protecting bigs that you can that they did split minutes with. I don't expect that to necessarily be the same moving forward. Maybe it will be, but I don't think it should be. But having that optionality for Coach Kidd to kind of look at, hey, which way do we want to go? And then you see Daniel Gafford, just as a result of playing with Kyrie and Luka, almost breaking Wilt Chamberlain's most consecutive field goal record, was insane. I think that really summed up what it means to give Luka, to always have a rim rolling elite in terms of athleticism and finishing big in someone like Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively II. So I think that was huge for Dallas. Obviously, you mentioned PJ Washington as well, who came in and was, defender number 2 next to Derek Jones Jr., but they did kind of need to go to him as a scoring option at sometimes. And I know OKC fans are still pulling out their hair with how he did them in the playoffs, considering last year for Dallas, he really did not shoot that well. And then he just caught fire in that OKC series, which might have been, I think if you ask a lot of OKC fans, like that swinging factor. And so for Dallas, I think what's so interesting is last year, yes, they made those moves, but the version of the Dallas team last year, in terms of who you're deferring to as shooters, before the trade deadline, Tim Hardaway Jr. was scorer option number 3. And he was lighting it up. Like, he was putting up good points. I wouldn't say he was necessarily shooting the greatest, but he was showing up. Post-trade, he kind of falls off the map. So now you're going into this final stretch of the season with your third scorer completely off the map. And so you're relying on your shooters who are, again, this is last year, obviously, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dante Exum, Derek Jones Jr., and a streaky PJ Washington, and Josh Green, who improved, but is not a pure shooter. He's just not that. No. So you look at that group, and the fact that group was able to play together the right way and hit the shots when they needed to and make it to the finals, that was a big deal. But obviously, going into this year, you got a completely different group with a lot more pure shooting. So I think that is an element that's getting overlooked. I think people are quick to kind of look at Klay, and I'm sure we'll get into it more, but I think people are quick to look at Klay and say he's washed, whatever. Look at him in the preseason, whatever, which he didn't even play with Luka once in the preseason, but that's not neither here nor there. The point is Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson, Quentin Grimes, even Jaden Hardy, all these guys are shooters. The guys last year fit really well together. It was a fun team, whatever. Not necessarily pure shooters. I think that is going to be a huge difference between last year and this year.
So let's talk about it, because like I said, there is a big change to this team, and that's former Splash brother Klay Thompson. And you mentioned some of the other moves, adding Quentin Grimes, former Knick. He's at Najee Marshall, but Klay Thompson, adding him to this team, like I said, some people may think he's washed. I don't think so. I think obviously he's not the same Klay. I mean, you have injuries. The injuries he had with an ACL and a ruptured Achilles, it's hard to be the same
a little bit.
Yeah, you're going to lose. You're not going to be the same defender. He's not going to be that same, plus defender, and not move the same. But there's still moments where he could still be Klay Thompson. So obviously you add him. How do you think he fits into this team with Klay, with Luka and with Kyrie in the front court, in the back court?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting from an offensive perspective. Obviously, when he's in Golden State, their sort of system is run around, get off these screens and get your looks. But in Dallas, it's going to be completely different for him. I mean, he's going to be playing. He's now one of the two guys. I don't want to just say in the corner, but you've got Kyrie and Luka at the top who sort of play off of each other. And then you have Derek Lively in the middle, who was fantastic last year at finding the open shooter out of that when whoever between Luka and Kyrie gets blitzed in those 3-on-2 situations. Derek Lively was awesome at finding the shooters. And so to have someone like Klay in that spot, and this is not a shot at Derek Jones Jr., but to sub Derek Jones Jr. out for someone like Klay Thompson, who's not going to be spending his energy on, like you said, somewhat of a different body, running around, running off screens, even having to be a ball handler, which he still will be at times, but he's not going to have to do that. He's really just going to kind of have to stand there. And so I think for Klay, he's going to just pour it in. And I mean, there are absolutely going to be games where he struggles. I think Dallas is sort of not necessarily expecting that, but is okay with that because you still have Luka, you have Kyrie. Like, you don't need Klay. Last year, he was arguably the number 2 option, or there were times where they needed him to be number 2, and he wasn't necessarily that, or he wasn't the best version of that. So they had to kind of expect different things from someone like Jonathan Kuminga. That's neither here nor there. But for Dallas, the expectation is a lot less. And so for him, I think going back to last year where Tim Hardaway Jr. was their 3rd option.
Oh man.
And like, exactly. Like,
I've been through the Tim Hardaway experience. Twice, Lauren. Twice we dealt with it.
Oh my God, I know. Yeah. And so exactly. So you take that role and you put Klay Thompson, not necessarily in that, it's not apples to apples, but the point is being able to have a shooter like that who you're not going to have to run around from an offensive perspective, who just needs to convert on those open looks. I think Dallas expects him to be able to hit those. I think they expect him to come up big in playoff series where they trust him to hit shots in big moments. And I think that they're also going to see, a couple of opportunities where he does kind of utilize that mid-range game where he hits a pull-up off one dribble, or he finds himself in a pick and roll situation with Derek Lively. He was phenomenal last year in the pick and roll with Trace Jackson Davis. Derek Lively's a bit of a different story, as is Daniel Gafford. So I think that's a really underrated aspect of the addition, where you're going to see all the attention. Everyone talks about the attention going on Kyrie and Luka, and that's true, but it's what happens after that. It's when you give the ball to Klay. He's not the same level of playmaker that Luka and Kyrie are, but he can figure out a 3-on-2 situation with Derek Lively in a pick and roll, PJ in the opposite corner, or even as a cutter. So I think Dallas's offense is going to be incredibly dynamic. And on the opposite side of things, from a defensive perspective, yes, the boost in terms of post injuries, something to be concerned about, but Dallas's entire identity last season was team defense. It wasn't just individual defense. And so if you look at Luka and Kyrie's individual defensive advanced stats, there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Mavs fan, like that we saw those numbers and that they were there, but you still also with the eye test see at the end of games Luka getting tired, X, Y. So like there's a little bit of both. It's somewhere in the middle. So with Klay, as long as it's sort of this expectation that you don't need to necessarily go out there and be able to guard the opposing or like have to guard the opposing best offensive player. You just need to be able to pick up the system, figure out how to be a good team defender in this system, knowing that you have Derek Lively as that final line of defense. And I think that they're going to be able to do that. I don't think they're going to be, top 5 defense in the league. Maybe they will, because I do think Derek Lively could be that good. But
like if you look at, I think it was post, the turn of the new year, the defense was like top 5 in the league.
It was, it was crazy. And so I'm curious to see, you go from having your number 1 defender being Derek Jones Jr., and now you're pushing PJ into that spot and you expect him to be able to do it. And you hope that he can do it. I think he can do it, but I need to see it. I need to see it night to night. And so then your number 2 defender, like from a perimeter aspect, kind of has to be Klay Thompson. And so to me, I want to see, what does that look like? Is that something that they can get by with? Because this year, after last year, it was Daniel Gafford that was starting. And then we saw what Derek Lively did in the playoffs from a defensive standpoint. So coming into this year, does going from Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington to PJ Washington and Klay Thompson, does that kind of get leveled out by starting someone like Derek Lively, who's better on the perimeter than Daniel Gafford, obviously better in the paint than Daniel Gafford, just more size, and maybe a little bit quicker with his feet. And so I think that's my biggest question from a defensive standpoint for Dallas. But in terms of having concern about Klay being older and more injured from a defensive perspective, that's not my biggest concern.
There's a few young guys that, and obviously Quentin Grimes, he played on the Knicks, and he was someone I was really high on.
Right.
And, just injuries. And I just feel like, he got out of place a little bit, and then we wound up, trading him to Detroit. And then, he was stuck in Detroit, which I don't wish that on anyone to be stuck in Detroit. But now, because you see how happy he is now to play for a contender. So I feel like he's going to be an important piece for you guys too, because I feel like, some of the shooting numbers weren't great when he, last year with the Knicks, but I feel like he's going to be in a better situation with a better supporting cast. So I think the numbers, and he's in the contract year too. So I think there's motivation there to show out. But Jaden Hardy, we just saw him get a nice little 3-year, I think he got 16 mil, 18 mil around that. Yeah, 3 for 18. So got a nice little bump in pay. He's someone that I absolutely loved coming out of the draft. I know people were really hard on him because of his shooting splits. But I saw him in high school, and I'm like, that's a top 5 player. And I had him top 10 on my board.
Wow.
He wound up going to 2nd round, which is, I still can't believe he was a 2nd round pick, but he showed some flashes last year. And Jason Kidd, there was moments in big games where Crunch, he's playing, and he showed trust, which I love. I love when coaches do that. They tend to, especially when you're a 2nd round pick, you don't really get those opportunities.
Right.
And it's feel like he got those opportunities. And then I feel like he's learned a lot with Kai and Luka. What do you feel like the expectations are for this season? Because I feel like he's an underrated piece that if he keeps improving, that's just gonna help you guys so much, especially coming off the bench.
Yeah, without a doubt. He is a guy that I'm super excited about. I think, like you mentioned, the talent and skill that he has, especially on the offensive end, is very unique for a player at that age. You just see him have these finishing moments, or even just scoring off the dribble, where you're like, a guy that age, this new in the league, a 2nd round pick, should not be able to do that. And so he has been a really intriguing prospect from day one. There just really hasn't been a consistent opportunity for him. And then last year still really wasn't a consistent opportunity for him. Yeah. But you mentioned you go into the playoffs, and he gave them a huge boost in the Minnesota series. He didn't really get a big opportunity in the OKC series. They didn't really go to him too consistently. But then in that Minnesota series, you see him out there, and he's providing them with some real, actual juice that they needed. Legit. And so to see him rise to the occasion, because you can have good vets that still don't rise to the occasion come playoff time. That's a completely different skill set that some guys just don't have. And so to have that from a young guy is a big, big deal. And so I was nervous going into the offseason with how many changes Dallas had, and then also seeing that they needed to bring in a backup third primary ball handler. And even though Jaden Hardy really improved as a playmaker last year, especially in the pick and roll, like he's really taken steps forward there, I just had questions. Do they trust him to be that guy? So obviously they go out, they get Spencer Dinwiddie, which I was like, okay, makes sense. He's been in this system. But then the preseason happens, and I'm like, all right, yeah, you play your young guys and you can't overreact to the preseason, but I'm just looking from a decision-making standpoint. Spencer Dinwiddie not making good decisions. He's not. No. And then you got Jaden Hardy out there who's still making the reads on the pick and roll with the lobs, and he's cooking offensively, off the step back, off the drive, finishing over taller defenders through contact. Like he's doing what you need him to. So I'm sitting there like, please, between the playoffs and even just what we're seeing in the preseason and what they're seeing in training camp, I need this guy to have consistent minutes in the rotation. I think he's earned it. What more can he do? And so I was curious to see what that looks like. And then the extension happens, which with Jaden specifically, I wasn't sure if that was going to happen yesterday, but when it did, I was so pleased because I thought it was this sort of mutual, obviously a mutual agreement factually, but also this sort of, you are a part of what we're doing here. You're not going to be some guy who maybe we'll try to find in the rotation. Maybe we'll try to develop you, but our chips are all in on winning. So maybe you fit into that. Maybe you don't. To me, that says you are a part of this. So I tweeted out during the preseason that all I've taken away from the preseason is that Spencer Dinwiddie now needs to earn his minutes back from Jaden Hardy, because while Jaden isn't necessarily known to be a super strong defender, he has taken some steps forward there, but as a playmaker and obviously as a scorer, you can see what he's picking up from Kyrie. It's unbelievable. It's like a mirror image out there sometimes with the finishes that he has. He's so athletic. So I think he's going to be awesome to watch. Like we were talking about before, I think teams that want to go the distance and expect to have long seasons need to be able to rely on young guys. You also mentioned Quentin Grimes and the injury history there. Obviously, Dallas hopes that he can stay healthy, but if for some reason he starts struggling a bit, staying on the floor, well, you need to rely on someone like Jaden Hardy, who has been healthy and has been good for them. So I expect him to show up this season, and I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Jaden Hardy. There's not a lot of players I root for that are not on the Knicks that I root for, and Jaden Hardy is one of those guys. Like I said, I was very high on the pre-draft, so I think he's going to be a nice piece to you guys this season. So a few more things before I let you go.
Sure.
Luka Doncic, obviously he led the league in scoring, and we know how good he is. He is, to me, the best player in the NBA. I think he should have won the MVP last year. So does he win the MVP this year? Because he's my pick for MVP.
It seems like it's his to lose, right? Like you kind of look at the names out there, and I think a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people might expect the Nuggets to maybe take some steps back in the standings. And that was the argument against Dallas last year. It was like, okay, well, you're not at the top, so it's not Luka. And Denver's at the top and the numbers are there, so it's got to be Jokic. And for whatever reason, it wasn't Shea, but I'm not even going to get into that. And so to me, it's you look at Luka and Shea. That's who I'm looking at. I don't know. We'll see with Giannis, but I have questions about the Bucks, Tatum. That's just a stacked team, so the numbers don't always reflect. So to me, it's Luka or Shea, and those are the two teams that I think are going to be at the top of the West. I'm not trying to overlook Ant, but to me, that's what it is. And so for Dallas, for Luka, from a numbers perspective, I mean, the dude looks in shape. He looks ready to go. I expect Dallas to be at the top of the West. I think the scoring is going to continue to go up because, again, I just think he's more in shape. I think the more experience he gets, the better he gets, obviously. And I also think he's going to be able to conserve more energy from just being able to rely on some of these other guys that much more, to where he's going to be a more efficient three-point shooter. I think he's, again, going back to the pure shooters that they added. I think his assist numbers are going to go up. I can see a world in where their rebounding goes down a little bit, but I do think those assist numbers are going to be up there for sure. So I think it's going to be a race between him and Shea. But I do think, especially with where the narrative is right now, it's kind of his to lose this year. So we'll see.
I'm with you. I think it's his. I think it's his for the taking.
I
I
hope
think Dallas
so.
is gonna have a great season.
I think so too.
So what's the projection? Because I did a podcast yesterday and I predicted it's gonna be the Knicks versus Dallas in the NBA.
Oh,
Finals.
I love that. That would be awesome. Oh my god, that would be an awesome series.
That was my projection. I think that would be a tremendous series.
Yeah.
Obviously you have storylines. You got Jalen going against his former team, the team that didn't pay him. I love storylines. So that to me, storyline will just get driven up. So that's my prediction. So
no, I love that.
If you want to give a prediction, you can give. But what do you think? What do you think Dallas is going to do this year? Like, what is your projection for this season?
I think Dallas is. I think the floor is the Western Conference Finals. I really do. I think Ant is going to take steps forward this year, but I still think Minnesota. I still think they've got big questions. So, like, as good as I think he's going to be, and as much as there are certain things that I like, I'm lower on the Timberwolves than maybe most. So to me, I'm looking at OKC and I'm looking at Phoenix and Dallas. To me, those are the true three at the top.
Yeah.
Memphis, I don't want to jump the gun there, but Jaren Jackson, there's already struggles there. GG, Vince Williams, like all these already kind of happening. So to me, it's those three. I think Dallas with the continuity from a health perspective, I think you can bank on them more than you can bank on Phoenix, again, from a health perspective. And I also think Phoenix still has a big front court issue, even though I mentioned Mason Plumlee. I still think they've got questions there. And so then you go back to OKC, and who is already having health issues, but what does that team look like against this Dallas team? So still big questions there. Personally, I'm still taking Dallas because to me, against OKC, as much as I love Shea, I'm taking Dallas's 1 and 2 over OKC's 1 and 2. And so I think it would be a good matchup. And I think OKC, while they expected Dallas to struggle from 3 last year and be better from 3 last year, I think, again, Dallas, this team this year is much more suited to be that 3-point danger that they were against OKC last year. So I would still
killed them from the corner 3.
They did. And and I know, like I said, I know they were pulling their hair out, but now this year you got to deal with Klay Thompson and then PJ Still, but then also that entire bench group. And we'll see if Derek Lively's shooting threes by then. He just might be. And so I think as much as OKC thinks it could be a done deal by just adding Caruso, Hartenstein, step forward, Jalen Williams is going to take, I don't think that you can just say that that's a given if you're OKC. So I think it will be close. I'm still picking Dallas because I think Luka is going to be the MVP. So I think Dallas is going to come out of the West, and in the East, it needs to be anybody but Boston. Let's just say that.
I know, right? Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm bored. Yeah. I'm bored. Sorry. Yeah. I don't like that. Big questions in Philly, big questions for me in Milwaukee. Indiana, I think Indiana is interesting, but it's the top. You got to have the top. And right now, to me, it's like the tier 1 is Boston and New York. So for me, it's like at the top, it's Boston, New York, Philly, but Philly, big question mark.
A lot of question marks.
So for me, it's either going to be one of New York and Boston or Dallas and OKC. Any combination of those is where I'm at. And I think it's anybody's from that point on, because every single team has their weaknesses, but also their significant improvements from last year. So we'll see. We'll see.
It's going to be, like we mentioned before, the season's going to be one of the more exciting seasons we've had in a long time in the National Basketball Association. Got so many storylines, so many great young players, that that are on the rise. So a lot of great things. We got the Knicks and the Celtics. Who else is playing today?
Minnesota, LA. I think it's today.
Right?
I think that might be today.
Yeah, so we got 2 games today, but the Knicks playing against Boston. But Lauren, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been a long time. Hopefully we get you back on to talk more about the NBA and your Dallas Mavericks. Before we sign off, tell the people where they can find you if you got any, and whatever you got going on.
Yeah. So first, thanks again for having me. I always love talking hoops with you. I love the narrative stuff too. So this is great. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at the Lauren Gunn. That's Gunn with 2 N's. I am the creator of the Trading Post. So anytime the transaction cycle is kicking up, that's when I'll be sending out kind of my observations of maybe who has slid out of a rotation, maybe who is, liking certain tweets on Twitter. Not that that always means a whole lot, but where are there signs?
Who's unfollowed who?
Yeah,
Who doesn't
where
have
are there
on
maybe
their bio?
Exactly. Yeah, literally. Where are there maybe a few more signs of a player maybe disengaging, or even a team pulling back from a player? That's kind of where I'm just gathering all of those thoughts, and I tweet them out all in one place so you can keep track of who's available and maybe who's not. So come chat with me on there and maybe see who your team could be adding next.
Awesome. Appreciate you for coming on the podcast. Like I said, we'll definitely get you back for this season and talk more about everything going on in the league and Dallas. So on that note, everyone, make sure to follow me on Off the Ball Pod on X, on Instagram, Facebook. Make sure to follow. Make sure to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Make sure to rate 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Appreciate everyone who tuned in right now. But on that note, be well, be safe, take care. Basketball is back, baby. Take care, guys. Go. Nice.